Chapter 7. Yes, I did promise to tell you about the Great Entropy. A Children's Primer on the Truth of the Great Entropy by Proctor Desan Adarg. True scholars of history know that the Great Entropy is actually the fifth entropy. That is, the fifth entropy as they are known to have happened throughout history. Ockasella at the time was known as Kaz-Ness, and the Primacy War was at its height. Some high-level celestial and infernal ethereals were still claiming to be gods and controlled the High Rights Imperium. The People's Coalition, composed mostly of dark elves and humans, was the other major player in the war. The third participant was the Republic, a successor state to the Light Elf Empire. The Republic was no more or less a republic than the other two factions. It was just a name. The Republic had been losing hold over its people and failing militarily when they opened citizenship to mechs that had only crashed on Haraith a few decades earlier. While most other factions on the sphere were hostile to them, the Republic recognized them as sentient beings and expedited their integration into the existing Republic military forces, with mechs quickly becoming an invaluable part of the Republic war machine. The Republic rightly noted mech combat capabilities in wielding magic, even against ethereals, and that they were able to learn new spellcraft quickly. Although most of their technology was destroyed in the crash, they carried some of it within their very bodies, thus evening the playing field throughout the remainder of the Primacy War. The only reason this merely put the Republic back on an even playing field, rather than giving them an advantage, was the fact that the mechs were few in number, and fewer still were willing to join up with the Republic. So, in the years preceding what history would call the Great Entropy, the three alliances were more or less evenly matched. The remaining mechs, dwarves, ghosts, vampires, other revenants, and beast folk threw their lot in randomly with whatever alliance they hoped would mistreat them the least. Knowing there was a tremendous threat growing from the south, Alcin Daru of the People's Coalition called for a summit to be held in Kaz-Ness. All the powers agreed a unified front against the southern continent was to their benefit, but each in turn hoped to be the ruling power over that coalition and maintain that power after the crisis had passed. The South had made a deal with Subra Kiain, the last non-dormant dragon, or the last dragon who had at least not fled to one of the poles of the world to try to meditate and attain ascension. If the North had enough techno-magical power to deal with a dragon and was not overly fragmented, the South would most likely not attack. And so, at the summit, all the peoples of the world were there, and each alliance brought examples of its greatest attainments, both for war and more noble purposes. This is when the Great Entropy hit. It had been longer in duration than any other before it, and stranger in character. It did not put a blight on all plant life, but anything which would be considered a crop would not grow. At the time, people thought entropy events blocked magicka, but in fact, they blocked the capacity for consciousness to influence magicka. This one, too, varied in terms of what magics it blocked and when and in whom, but there wasn't exactly a great deal of solid information to go on in terms of comparing it to prior events. Legend had it that prior occurrences of entropy had specific effects by race. In the second entropy, according to legend at least, only dark elves could still heal, only humans could make anything with a magical conduit circuit function, etc., etc. But this time, in the Great Entropy, there was no pattern. Some could still heal to a degree, some could make machinery work, and some could make a meta-connection, for example. But it was not separated by race. It was the ghost of a half-elf, half-human named Landra Sul who, according to legend, went to the various corners of the city and rallied the people to unite. And so the three factions had to cooperate for survival. The Republic made the most outward overtures, at least of acting the part, but by some recollections initially put the least effort in. Groups of healers, food harvesters, and technology operators were segregated by their skills. The races had never cooperated so much. And that cooperation continued after the end of the Great Entropy and, for some, brought about a prosperity and progress not seen before. Revenants became key, as they could strobe quickly between all locations when portals and teleportation were not working. Ethereals could as well. Mechs could heal others and assist the sick without danger of contamination, as it seemed this round of the Great Entropy was damaging the organic bodies of many living beings. This was the first time for many people working alongside not only the other races, but ethereals, revenants, and mechs. After the end of the Great Entropy, the Republic Capital Market, a mercantile and tradecraft center in Kasnes, previously attached to the Republic, had grown in power and influence, becoming a micro-city within a city in and of itself. With the primacy wars finally winding down, larger merchant guilds gained significant political power in the now waning Republic, and chose to rename the capital market holdings in Kasnes to Okasela. A few centuries prior, a language known as the merchant tongue had been developed within the capital market and was still in regular use. The trade language, in truth, was primarily Elven in origin, and not meant so much for communication between the people of the northern continent among one another, but between the various continents of Heraeth. But it was the best anyone could make do to source a word from some neutral ground. Okasela originally meant safe market, or marketplace of even ground. The merchant trade tongue was fairly limited in its application, so there were not many words to choose from. Even to this day, those in the marches and other areas outside the city who do not really see Okasela as a shining beacon of progress still acknowledge its role in the southern continent of Lavaras, choosing not to attack the northern continent Oit during the vulnerability of the Great Entropy period. That wasn't the worst history article I've ever read, Scully. Nor the best. The font was, well, the font was surly. Don't you think? Anyway, few people had dived into causal science as much as Dharma Laban had. That this dark elf male was a great fan of Earth game was no surprise. He loved imagining a world where without magic, all technology had to be cause and effect based. But the truth was, his real passion was building purely causal devices that would work in the real world. And this fired him up like nothing else. But it was not until he started studying magecraft that his true and singular life goal was defined. Originally, Dharma wanted nothing to do with theoretical magecraft. He was a competent enough mage and engineer just from basic university courses. And indeed, in building his causal devices, he even used magic to build them. If a weld could be done via a heat spell or a welding torch, why not use a more efficient heat spell? As long as the device, once assembled, could perform its function without harnessing any fundamental magicka. So be it if he needed to use magic in the building process. But again, he only got around to taking theoretical magecraft as a one-off course as his degree was completed long ago, when he was convinced by members of his friend circle that he might be in a bit of an information echo chamber when it came to views and even approaches to matters. He ended up loving the course and loved reconnecting to learning later in life. But it was this course that was spark on his life goal. You should go back to school, Scully. I'll go with you. You're right, that was presumptuous. I don't know for a fact you ever went to school. Nor do I know you are not actively engaged in classes right now. For my presumption, I apologize. But yes, the point of mentioning Dharma taking the course was because his very reason for being arose from it. It had come upon him as a sudden flash of a concept all at once, and the idea was this. If another great entropy did occur, would it be a purely causal device that did not require magicka to run, could manipulate a small area within a great entropy to restore magic within that area to normal function? In the end, light was a form of magic, was it not? Light and magic were different ways of looking at the same fundamental constant. And there was a good deal of knowledge on how to use causal means to manipulate what one might call conventional light. At least in a lay being's terms, conventional. And thus was born what 7 years later would be known as the Polyluminary Oscillation Technologic Device, or plot device for short. Dharma could only take testing on it so far. After all, a working test would involve another great entropy, and Dharma would be fine never needing to test his device for the disaster it would mean. Though on some days he would ask himself, perhaps a small entropy in my lifetime, so I can see if it would work. He supposed theoretically he should perhaps appoint a successor one day, but that seemed a later stage in the process. Besides the device working, if ever it was needed, it would need to be done from a high point in the city. The tallest building in Okasela was the World Building, of course, and it would need to be delivered there quickly. It was then that Dharma remembered the fourth wall. It was a historic wall, the fourth defensive one built before Okasela was Okasela in ancient times around Old Kasnes. And a substantial portion of it remained on the boundary of the Harmony District and the city centre. In fact, several modern warehouses and workshops actually had portions of it as their back wall. Dharma decided to finally assemble the plot device in such a workshop, one very near the Guild Convention Hall. His plan, if ever an entropy came, would be to pilot the device, mounted to both a land and aerial vehicle, which itself was also purely causal, and would have fit in quite well on his beloved fictional Earth, through the easily breakable fourth wall and mount the plot device high atop the World Building. Yes, he is a clever guy, and we like him. But we're not going to be spending as much time with him, Scully, as our other friends. He's not going to do much till later anyway. Unless you want us to chat about what he has for lunch every day. It's a salad with meat slices, by the way. So, as for me, I was in the West Marches when we chatted last. Or when we chatted about me last. I mean, when we chatted about me last directly. We talked about Kalen and Tuadon's guests, that rude guy from the city council, and that odd ghost lady talking about me. To clarify, it's not that we were in the marches the last time we talked about me. You and I were past the marches. But the last time we talked about me, we were referring to when you and I were in the marches. I am rambling, Scully, I've lost you. Now, I bet you think this creature seems odd and polite and harmless. Oh, I hope I am. But I would be lying to you if I said I was 100% sure I am not the Lich Lord in all these folks' legends. I am not saying I am. I know I was something else once. And not just anything else, a specific something else and someone else. Drothla, it's what they call it now, has something to do with me when there was a me. I had a me. I guess I still have a me. The who of my me is here, but the when and how and what is gone. And who the who of that me knew is gone. That explains the sadness, you know, the crippling sadness. I wasn't just someone. I was specifically someone. Just like Tuadon is Tuadon and Selman is Selman. And from their thoughts, these people of this time, I know so much about this time, and I forget these times are not my own. But I am most definitely what they call a revenant. Am I a member of the revenant community? Well, the only community I have is you. At the bottom of the pocket in my jerkin. Except for now, because I have you out so we can chat. So no, I am not a member of any community. But maybe I will be when I get to Ocasella. Yes, Scully fellow. That's what I call you, but Scully for short, although only I can call you that. That is where we are going, Ocasella. Maybe I will then be part of something, or horribly apart from it. I'd like this to be the part where I reassure you, no, tell you, I am not going there to conquer or maim, or usher in another entropy. But I do have visions of me doing that. Maybe there is some higher purpose thing to it. What is a great entropy, you ask? And why am I so odd and self-conscious? I am self-conscious that I'm self-conscious, but the display of it, trying to appear non-threatening, which is tough. I am a 9-foot-tall lich. Why I feel the need to display it, I don't know. I am very aware it's artifice. So, Scully, what was the great entropy, you ask? It was just the most recent part of the entropy cycle. It's the one these people remember because, at least in their stories, the races came together to survive it. And that's what makes their modern greatness so very greatly great and makes the virtues they strive for so very virtuous. Sometimes it's called the fifth because there were a few others in earlier recorded history. Oh, okay. What's an entropy event? How basic do you need me to get, Scully? Entropy is the tendency of the universe to tend toward, well, depending on who you ask, chaos or evenness. Scully, you know the 4 fundamental forces of the universe, right? Well, I know with your response that you were joking, Scully, but actually, yes. Gravity and electromagnetism are 2 of the fundamental forces. Hate to tell you the strong and weak nuclear forces were just made up for Earth game. No, the other 2 are consciousness and magicka, Scully. Gravity and electromagnetism are entropic. Magicka, well, nascently it is extropic, and consciousness, well, it's kinda extropic. Anyway, an entropy is when the link between consciousness and its ability to direct magicka decreases. And so the entropic properties of the universe become more dominant in a region of space and time. These shifts happen naturally. Or if there is too much distance between reality and collective perceived reality, or between the perceptions of reality among sapient conscious beings. See, that creates a sort of set of conflicting instructions around the link between consciousness and magicka. If enough of that occurs, the link breaks. All entropies since there have been sentient beings are a mix of 2 things. Firstly, natural causes, and secondly, induction, lengthening or shortening of the entropy by the level of discord between the wills trying to push magicka. Are you happy I cleared that up, Scully? What do you mean I didn't clear up anything? I'm getting bored with this, but fine. Okay, well, the Great Entropy was about 400 years ago and lasted 3 months. It hit different parts of the world in different intensities, and it sucked if you were a plant. How do plants make food? Well, the leafy ones absorb magicka from the sun to create simple stores of bioenergy and sugar. It also sucked if you were a technologically advanced society. Because technology is built on what, Scully? Causal forces and magical forces and their interplay. And while you can direct causal forces just fine by hand, if the link between consciousness and magicka is broken, you can't direct anything, magical or quasi-magical. So yes, environmental and civilization-ending catastrophe. But in Ocasella, or the merchant city there before Ocasella, the three major region political factions of the North gathered there for a summit to plan against a possible combined invasion from the South and a polar dragon when the Entropy hit. Things would touch and go for a while, but all the races worked together in the end and made it through the 3-month Entropy. This is called the Reconciliation, and refers to both that of the races and eventually Magica with the other three forces when the Gull Draft Entropy finally ended. Yes, you're right. That cute street Nissal likes is named for it. Go Scully. Now, I remember an earlier Entropy, and I think I remember this. It's my memory, Scully, not one of these memories that flooded into me. I remember that the Entropy didn't affect me. And I remember that made people not like me. And then I remember that I could cause a little entropy here and there with Magica. And I think I could clear them up. And no one else could use their Magica. Is another entropy coming? I don't know, Scully. Will I bring one? Haven't you figured out that I don't know who I am? Oh, wait, there's some guys here. I think they won't think I've got all my cats in the blanket if they see us chatting. So I'm going to pretend you are just a regular skull, which you are. But I am imbuing you with this quality of sentience to quell my intense loneliness. So I need to stop doing that. I need to see who these guys are, Scully. No, not up this close. I can't read minds or drink memory this close because it would be tacky if they're right there. I'll have to talk. Now, watch this, Scully. I'm going to say something friendly and corny, and these guys are going to be like, hey, this giant revenant person is all right. It looks like some of them are revenant community too, as Tuadon would say. Right? Our buddy Tuadon, who has never met us, but he is our buddy in my mind. Okay, here goes. Sure is dusty out here, I say in a friendly way. The party assembled were 2 vampires, a human and an elf, all in very plain-looking dark grey clothes. My words seemed to pause them. At last, one of them, who I decided to call Tall Pants and appeared to be a human vampire, spoke. I called him Tall Pants because his pants were hiked up very high on his waist, and I assumed he did this to make himself look tall, although this was not the effect it had. I am glad you agree with my analysis, Scully. My lord? Said Tall Pants, confused. I am not yours, and I don't think I have a gender, definitely don't want one. They seem itchy, I said, rather petulantly. Oh, prophesized one! Tall Pants started shouting. Maybe he thought I couldn't hear him? He started waving his arms around in big sweeping arcs. I agree, Scully, that arm waving looks like fun. We are from the Church of the First Cause. The true Church of First Cause. Not the false believers who dwell among the magic users. We greet you. The people whose thoughts I have been reading think these guys from First Cause are weird. But I think it would be wrong to be rude to them, so we need to be polite, Scully. I wave my arms in response to Tall Pants. You were right, this is fun. I respect your right to your beliefs and a reasonable expression of those, Tall Pants. Provided you don't, think your rights include tromping on others' rights. Scully says that's the right balance for this era, I said, realizing my vow to not talk to you while talking to them had failed. We knew from the ancient writings you might be disoriented, my lord, said Tall Pants, not as confident and arm-wavy as before. We are here to aid you in your mission, my lord. Tall Pants and his friends all look at each other and start mumbling things. Yes, I could very easily read their minds, but that would be rude. I'm sure they will tell me if it's something important. To get to Ocasella and do something? I asked with my out-loud voice. To usher the end of magic and the return of cause, as was the way for the world before the spectrums of false light were bent by the betrayer, said Tall Pants, clearly very proud of himself. I take it this myth you have about why the world is the way it is supposed to have happened a while ago? Like at least 3 weeks ago, right? I asked. Needs a Name, another of the group, spoke. Greatness, you are disconnected. A band of magecraft researchers. Vermin who wish to further blend the foulness of magic with the purity of cause are near here. We shall feed their lives to you, and your thoughts will be restored. They mean business, Scully. They've got big knives and swords with symbols on them. People with symbols on their weapons mean business. We've got to stop them. This looks like a job for whoever I am. No, don't do that, I said, all humour drained from my chorus-like voice, as you later told me. We must, said Needs a Name, and they changed posture as if to march. The priests, for that is what they were, made off as if to go about their intended action and slaughter the nearby encamped researchers with the symbol-etched weapons. Stop, I said, as green light came from my hands. Scully, I agree that my voice was now serious, as that layered chorus of 4 or 5 voices on top of one another somehow carried with it, all at once, authority, warning, and a pleading for reason. My armored hand extended in a motion to accompany my statement, but something more happened. A green light came out, like high magicka, but different somehow. It had a notion of fluidity and thickness to it. It enveloped the priests and obscured them, and when it receded, the priests were simply gone. There was no blood, no dust, and no hint of violence. If the magecraft researchers had been half a mile closer and seen it, they would have been fascinated. Assuming their potential horror and fear of me could be overcome, the researchers themselves would have dropped what they were doing to try to understand what type of magic, if it was even magic, they had just seen. But the only witness, not counting you, was me. How do I feel? Well, you know me somewhat, Scully, from our chats on these walks. At least you know a bit how I regard myself to be, until I get to Ocasella. Imagine you and me, Scully. I am processing what happened. I need the comfort of talking to you again, even though I know it is profoundly ridiculous. I would be lying if I hadn't imagined I had some kind of power. It would seem to go with my trappings, you know. But this, I don't even know what that was. I can name it. Green glowy thing. I feel safer when I give things names. But naming this doesn't help. I think I am afraid. Scully, I think I don't feel okay. Thank you. I am really glad you're with me. Can we just sit down a minute without talking?